Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from the first group and we are going to share about the roles of universities and colleges in civilizational building based on the experience of Islamic civilization. And I am the first presenter, Izzah binti Rahman. Before we go further, let us find out about the roles of universities and colleges in common, also the concept of Islamic civilization in general. Colleges and universities function as the production of highly skilled manpower and research output to meet perceived targets. As an educational establishment, their function is to provide able, self-directed learners that are independent and confident and will go out into society and give to society through leadership or through civic duties. They are also created for the building of new institutions of civil society, in developing new cultural values, and in training and socializing people of new social era. Or we can call them as the generators of knowledge and technology. The research institutions are there to provide new knowledge, to change paradigms, to aid the society and its development, and in meeting new challenges as they come along. So, the graduates can help find solutions for all the new things that never happened before. For the next one, let's talk about what is the concept of Islamic civilization in general. Civilization is the manifestation of beliefs in every aspect of human's life. Is the manifestation of Islamic faith, or we call it Tawheed, in every aspect of Muslims' life. To determine the value of civilization, we should delve deep into its soul and explore its foundation.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nura Atifah Nabiha binti Muhammad Shukri with metric number 2017518, and I will continue the presentation by explaining about the presence of the Islamic civilization in the global context. There are at least three levels of understanding exist for the concept of a civilization's worldwide presence. First, on a physical level, but only within its territorial confines. Second, on a cultural level, but mostly in its physical representation. And third, there is the intellectual, spiritual level, which is concerned with intangibles like ideas, concepts, theories, worldviews, ideals, and moral goods. So let's take a look at one by one of the levels mentioned. Every civilization has a territorial foundation. A civilization can have a small territorial base that cannot be termed global in extent, yet whose culture commands a global presence. Let me give you an example of what I meant by this. Take a look at the Japanese culture. Its territorial scope is limited to the Japanese islands as a whole. In current times, Japanese people can be found in large numbers outside of Japan, particularly in Hawaii and various Latin American countries. Even if we consider that these Japanese populations outside of Japan to be part of modern Japanese civilization, on the assumption that they continue to contribute to a uniquely Japanese culture, the territorial base remains limited. Modern Japanese civilization, on the other hand, commands a global presence through the internationalization of its cultural and, to a lesser extent, intellectual goods. As a technocratic society, modern Japanese civilization's global footprint is primarily manifested in the technological items it produces and exports for which it is known. So, in the case of the Islamic civilization, Islam's territorial base has been global since the beginning of the 7th century, less than 100 years after the Prophet's death. It means here that the Islamic ruled regions had engulfed the vast majority of the globe, encompassing all continents except the Americas. Spain remained under Islamic authority for about 8 centuries, from the first half of the 7th century to the end of the 15th century when it is reconquered by Christians. With the exception of the loss of Spain and Sicily in Italy, Islam's territorial base has stayed mostly unaltered. However, in terms of Muslim demographic presence, the modern Muslim Ummah has genuinely globalized, with Muslim populations located in virtually every modern nation-state. It remains to be seen whether global Muslim minority will have a substantial impact on the future global Islamic civilization's cultural and intellectual elements. The next level, which indicates the presence of Islamic civilization in the global context, is cultural presence. Even though much remains to be investigated, the global presence of Islamic civilization at the cultural and intellectual levels has been universally accepted, at least among academics. Classical tangible cultural commodities such as agricultural goods generated by Islamic science, technology, and art were exported around the world, especially to the Americas, because they were either unique or the best of their kind at the time. These cultural goods are comparable to modern technology items generated by advanced countries and subsequently exported around the world, because they had been part of Islamic civilization for ages. When Spain and Portugal conquered and divided South America, they brought with them cultural products from the Islamic civilization. Another level that contributes to the Islamic civilization in the global context is the intellectual spiritual level. Far more enduring as facets of Islamic civilization's global cultural presence than these physical cultural goods are intellectual goods, including the intangible dimension of knowledge culture that Islam has created. So, ideas, concepts, values, and institutions originating from Islam has passed to the West through various channels and have become accepted as parts of modern Western culture. Several Western scholars of Islamic civilization, including British Marxist historian J. D. Bernal and the Italian Alessandro Balsani, maintain that Islamic intellectual culture is an important integral component of modern Western culture. So that is all about on my part. I will pass to the next presenter to present the next topic.
Okay, so Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Now, moving on to our next discussion on the topic about the evolution of the concept of Islamic education. So, in this topic, I, Izzah Shazuna Binti Ransafawi, with metric number of 2012450, will explain to you about the definition of Islamic education and its aims and objectives, as well as the history of Islamic education throughout pre-modern Islam up until the modern time. So, without further ado, let's start. Okay, so now let's start first with the definition of Islamic education. So, what is education in Islam? In order to have a better understanding about the aims and objective of education, we first must have a clear understanding on the definition of education itself. So, education can be defined into several definitions. Based on the slide, education in general means a process of disseminating education to someone who does not yet have it for use in daily life. Meanwhile, Islamic education or education in Islam, based on the Islamic scholars' definition, is a process of imparting knowledge to a person in order to shape a personality and character in daily life based on the Islamic teachings. So, in the Arabic language, there are three terms of education. The first one is ta'lim, comes from the root of alima, meaning to know, to be aware, to perceive, and to learn, which is used to indicate knowledge being sought or imparted through instruction and teaching. The second one is tarbiyah, comes from the root of raba, meaning to increase, to grow, and to rear, implies a state of spiritual and ethical nurturing in accordance with the will of God. And the last one, which is the third one, is ta'dib, comes from the root of aduba, meaning to be cultured, refined, well-mannered, suggests a person's development of sound social behavior. What is meant by sound requires a deeper understanding of the Islamic conception of the human being. So based on this, the concept of education in Islam must be taken into consideration in all the dimensions stated above, because no matter which one of the above concepts is preferable to scholars, it should not be used as a pretext for controversy and intellectual acrimony among scholars, because what matters is not the concept, but the practice, methodology, and its objectives. So now let's look at the aims and objectives of Islamic education. So as you can see, the main purpose of Islamic education is to produce a good human being, which is al-insan al-ali, who is capable of delivering his or her duties as the Abdullah, which is the servant of Allah, and his Khalifa, which is vicegerent on this world. So meanwhile, based on the theories from a few Muslims intellectuals, Al-Ghazali stated that the purpose of Islamic education is a development of character, including the promotion of moral and ethical qualities and the good attitudes. Secondly, education should make the child firm in religious beliefs, otherwise he will be led astray. And the third one is to cultivate man so that he abides by the teachings of religion and is hence assured of salvation and happiness in the eternal life hereafter, which is al-akhirah. Meanwhile, from the theories of Ibn Khaldun, he stated that Islamic education is to make Muslims firm believers in God through the study of the Quran and religious sciences that will help him to be a good Muslim and a good member of society. Moving on to the contemporary perspectives about the aims and objectives of Islamic education, Muhammad Sharif Khan, in his book, stated that the purpose of Islamic education is to provide the teachings of Holy Quran as the first step of education, and secondly is to provide experience which are based on the fundamentals of Islam as embodied in Holy Quran and Sunnah, which cannot be changed, and thirdly to provide experience in the form of knowledge and skills. These experiences are likely to be changed in the light of changes in society. And the fourth is to develop such qualities of a good man which are universally accepted by the societies which have faith in religion. So as you can see, to be an educated person, man has to actualize and understand the aims and objectives of education. So now we will look through the history of Islamic education. So firstly, we will look on the history of education in pre-modern Islam. So from the very earliest days of Islam, the issue of education has been at the forefront at the minds of Muslims. The very first word of the Quran that was revealed to the Prophet of Muhammad SAW was in fact Iqra, meaning read. And the fourth Prophet of Muhammad SAW also stated in his hadith that Talabul ilmi faridatun ala kulli muslimin, meaning seeking knowledge is a mandatory for all Muslims. So with such a direct command to go out and seek knowledge, Muslim has placed a huge emphasis on the educational system in order to fulfill his obligation placed on them by the Prophet of Muhammad SAW. So before the modern era, the very first educational institution of Islamic world were quite informal. Mosques usually were used as a meeting place where people can gather around a learned scholar and attend his lectures and also read books with him or her and gain knowledge. So the education at that time would begin at a young age with study of the Arabic and the Quran. And some students also would then proceed to train and learn in tafsir and also fiqh, which is Islamic jurisprudence. Then around 90s, young students were educated in a primary school called a maktab. So maktab were typically attached to mosques where resident scholars and imams would hold classes for the children. So basic Arabic reading and writing, arithmetic and Islamic law will be covered in this class. And throughout their childhood, the majority of the local population was educated in such primary school. And then after completing the curriculum of the maktab, the student could go on their adult life and find an occupation or move on to the higher education in a madrasa, which is the Arabic word for school. Okay, so the madrasas was established in an effort to secure support and cooperation of the ulama, which is the religious scholar. So, for example, the madrasah that was established during that time was include Al-Azhar University in the Cairo, Egypt, and also Al-Qarawini in the Fez, Morocco. So these madrasah were usually attached to a large mosque. So basically, it was attached to the mosque in that university. So we can say that this madrasa could be considered to be the very first modern universities that had separate faculties for each subject with resident scholars who were expert in their respective fields. And at the madrasa, students could be educated further in religious sciences, Arabic and secular studies such as medicine, mathematics, astronomy, history, geography, and many on. So basically, that was the very first start of education in pre-modern Islam. And the next one, we will look through the history of education in the modern time, which is meaning after the 90s and above. So the question, does the Islamic education still continue until today? The answer is yes. The tradition of madrasas and other classical forms of Islamic education continues until today, although in a much more diminished form. But despite the new system in place in much of the Muslim world, traditional education still survives. For example, the traditional curricula that combine Islamic and secular sciences continue to be offered at the universities such as Al-Azhar, Al-Qarawin, and Darul Ulum in Dubai, India. So this such an intellectual tradition is rooted in the great institutions of the past which produced some of the greatest scholars of Islamic history and is still spreading the message and knowledge of Islam to the general public. Therefore, we can see that the Islamic education up until today is still continue, and the Muslims will make sure to deliver this virtue of Islamic education to the world.
Now, we've already prefaced about the roles of universities, right? But who are they? Which universities who had contributed in carrying their roles? Now, my name is Siti Aisyah Bita Abdul Razak. My matric number is 2018 480. Now, I will show you some examples of universities who had carried their roles and contributed in building the civilization. The first one is Baitul Hikmah, which is also known as Khazanah al-Hikmah, that they even existed in the time of Al-Rashid. Baitul Hikmah was the first institution of higher scientific studies among the Muslim world, that they even had academy library and translation bureau in Baghdad. In the 9th century, most of the translations were produced in Baghdad. For example, the works in the field of astronomy, mathematics, geography, physics, philosophy, and etc. were mostly being translated in many other languages, specifically in the period of Abbasid. For your information, the Abbasid period was also known as the Golden Age of Muslim, as they are not famous because of their translation works, but also because of their development in various fields of sciences. Here I put some Muslim scholars from Baitul Hikmah who had contributed in translation works. The first one is Jabir al-Batani, who is known as the mathematician and astronomers of all time. The second one is Jabir ibn Hayyan, who is the father of chemistry, specifically during the Middle Ages, as his major contribution was in the field of chemistry. Next, Al-Azhar University, which I bet that most of us know this university because it is quite famous in Malaysia though. But anyway, Al-Azhar was founded by the Fatimid commander named Jauhar. The system of education at Al-Azhar remained relatively unchanged since its early history, and the program of study offers there are Islamic theology, Islamic law, Arabic language, Quran and Sunnah. Not just that, Al-Azhar is also known as the Qiblatul Ilm, which means the center of knowledge, as it offers a wide range of Islamic studies disciplines beside the study of the Quran and Hadith. For example, the Faculty of Sharia of the University of Damascus in Syria follows the teaching methods of the Al-Azhar University. Not just that, the Malay graduates from the Al-Azhar University built Islamic religious schools in Malaya, in which I bet that most of us know this because we tend to learn this before when we were in secondary school. Therefore, we can see that the Al-Azhar University contributed a lot in Islamic education. These are some famous figures of Al-Azhar University. The first one, Timothy John Witter or Sheikh Abdul Hakim Murad, who is an English Sunni Muslim scholar, researcher, writer and academic. He is also the Dean of the Cambridge Muslim College. The second one, Burhanuddin Rabbani, the one who wears the black clothes and who has the white beard. He is an Afghan politician who served as President of the Islamic State of Afghanistan from 1992 to 1996. And the last one, Yusuf al-Qaradawi, who is an Egyptian Islamic theologian based in Doha, Qatar, and chairman of the International Union of Muslim Scholars. Last one, Al-Qarawiyyin University. It was founded even earlier than the first university in Europe, which is Salem University in Italy. For your information, Al-Qarawiyyin was 190 years old, way more earlier than the Salem University. There are many fields of studies in Al-Qarawiyyin, such as astronomy, Quran, religious sciences, law, rhetoric, logic calculation, mathematics, geography, medicine, Islamic rules, history, and chemistry. Furthermore, Al-Qarawiyyin had become a meeting point for the cultural meeting of Islamic and European trade and pedagogy, in which it rapidly turned into an institution which was pivotal in the western axis of Islamic Caliphate lands. Meaning to say, Al-Qarawiyyin was a place for people to gather, to do activities and learn together. But then it became a place for politicians, scholars and students from all around the world to gather and discuss. Here are some famous figures of Al-Qarawiyyin University. The first one, Abu Uwais Muhammad Abu Hubza Al-Hassani, in which you can see he is the one who has the white beard and wear the green clothes. He is a Moroccan Muslim theologian, jurist, bibliographer and linguist. The second one, Muhammad Ibn Abdul Al-Karim Al-Khattabi, which was a Moroccan political and military leader and the president of the Republic of the Rif.
Just now, my fellow friend already explained about the example of universities which have carried their role in contributing in their civilization. Now, I, Siti Zulaika binti Johari, with the metric number 2019650, will continue the discussion about the impact of the role of universities and colleges on Islamic civilization. Now, without further delay, I will continue our discussion about the impact of the role of universities and colleges on Islamic civilization. The first one is to produce human beings who practice lifelong Islamic education at all levels of society and acquire knowledge skill to generate income, improving the community's socio-economic status. As example given in here, a lifelong learning program with short professional courses is offered at the International Islamic University of Malaysia, IIUM, to help those students develop their abilities by integrating the curriculum. Students and also general public can use such a program to assess knowledge that is in line with the university's ideologies, which is the knowledge should be spread in the spirit of Tawhid, which leads towards the recognition of Allah as the absolute creator and master of mankind. Now we have come to the last part of the impact of the role of universities and colleges on Islamic civilization, which is to develop and maintain the culture of Islamic knowledge. As we know, universities and colleges play a significant role in the dissemination of Islamic education and knowledge. The goal of building and maintaining an Islamic knowledge culture may be realized with the presence of a full institution in terms of infrastructure, information, and teaching facility.
To conclude, Islamic civilization evolves beneath every aspect of human's life, either in terms of territorial, cultural, and also intellectual, spiritual. It influences the lifestyle of not only people in the East, but also everyone around the world. So, as a Muslim, we must take use and take the most benefits from the efforts made by the ulama, and that brings Islam to who we are today. That's all from us. Thanks for lending us your ears and eyes and paying your attention. And wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.